So it's 4:57 p.m. There you are, minding your own business, trying to wait till 5 o'clock patiently for the day at work to end so you can go home to your family, and boom, you're hit by the brightest flash of light you've ever seen in your life, any human being's ever seen. Blinding light, just overtaken, amazing blinding light. 2 minutes later, before that clock hits 5, shockwave hits, windows blow out, furniture blows over, massive concussion, massive shockwave. And that's one possible scenario, guys. Nuclear war is a reality, and what I described is one possible scenario. You may not get alerts. You might be lucky and get an alert on your phone that says missiles inbound, and you might have 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get to cover. Really depends on the scenario, right? There's a lot of different possible things that could happen, different ways this could go down, right? One attack scenario is start with an EMP. EMPs would wipe out electronics, meaning you wouldn't get that alert on your phone. Missile sirens might not go off. You might get hit by the blinding flash of light. Light travels faster than sound. So pretty much anywhere except for absolute ground zero, you're going to get hit by the light first, right? If you do get that warning, if you do get that time, you get that alert on your phone, missiles inbound. I think there was a false alarm that hit Hawaii years back. I seem to remember that. Get to cover, right? Bad things are about to happen, and we talked about the flash of light. Certainly find cover. Stay away from windows, right? Windows could blow out even long distances, many miles. I read up to 100 miles away from a nuclear detonation, windows could blow out. That, of course, depends on the situation. A lot of depends. How big is the bomb, right? What's between you and the bomb that might slow down the shock wave? You get that light first, right? So before the initial blast, find cover. Take cover. So a 20 kiloton weapon will destroy or severely damage most buildings 1.42 miles from ground zero. 20 megaton weapon would destroy or severely damage out to about 16 miles. The SS-18 Russian ICBM carries 10 500 kiloton nukes, and it doesn't scale in a linear way, which means a 20 megaton, which would be 20 million tons of TNT, is not 1,000 times bigger than 20 kiloton, which would be 20,000 pounds of ENT. It doesn't necessarily scale like that, so something like a 500 kiloton might be more likely. They carry multiple smaller warheads to cover more area, but you figure 16 miles, right? Some kind of a blast could go out within 60 miles, destroy a lot of stuff, but beyond that, up to 100 miles out, you can get the flash of light, you can get windows blown out, you can get a lot of damage. So during the blast, right, as I said, like thunder and lightning, you see the lightning before you hear the thunder. Light travels faster than sound. So unless you're actually there on ground zero, and I'm looking over here, and boom, mushroom cloud forms, that light's going to hit you first, and the light could blind you. So first thing you want to do is get to cover, right? And that depends on where you're at. Is there shelter? Can you run to shelter? You may have minutes or less before you get hit by the shockwave. If you get hit by the shockwave, may just be dropped to the ground, but the important thing is cover your eyes. You need your eyes. You're going to need to be able to see in the minutes, hours, and days after this horrible event happens. So you might have seconds to think about where you're at. Are you in a building? Are you sitting outside? How are you going to cover your eyes? You're just going to get on the ground in case the shockwave does hit you. You might have seconds to make that, right? Lay down, protect your eyes. Exposed skin, there might not be much you could do about exposed skin, but depending on how far you are, a heat wave may follow the flash of light. You're talking maybe second degree burns, really depends on where you're at. Not good on exposed skin, but there's going to be some life or death decisions and situations that are going to be coming up very quickly. So after the light hits, so the shockwave travels at 1 mile every 5 seconds, and they suspect, they know, I mean, the shockwave travels faster than the speed of sound, just because you're talking, you know, tons, thousands, millions of tons of TNT just went off. That shockwave is going to travel faster than the speed of sound, 1 mile every 5 seconds. So if your mind is there, and it may not be, you could actually count, you know, just like when you see lightning and you hear thunder, you can predict how far the storm is away. You could actually predict how far a nuclear detonation was away, depending on the time between when you saw the flash of light and when you hear the sound, when you hit the shock wave 1 mile every 5 seconds. So if 2 minutes passes after you see the light and there's no sound or shock wave, then you're more than 25 miles from the explosion. You're probably not going to get hit by a shock wave. So down, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, count, eyes closed, covered. 2 minutes goes by, you're still there. You're probably far enough away from the explosion that you're not going to get hit. You're not going to get hit by some devastating shock wave, explosive, concussive force, blistering heat, right? So what do? Obviously, as we said, stay away from windows. There could be multiple detonations unless it's a single weapon attack. If we're talking about multiple ICBMs being exchanged, multiple nuclear weapons being exchanged, there could be other hits, right? So always, through this whole situation, for at least several hours, stay away from windows, right? And then you're talking about get to the best shelter you can. 2 minutes has gone by, you haven't gotten by the blast. They're saying 15 minutes, and it depends, right? That's not a hard and fast scientific rule, 15 minutes, but you could say you have 15 minutes to get to shelter. And what does shelter mean for nuclear weapons? Well, it's the best. It's the best shelter you've got, the best you can get. If all you've got is your house, get in your house, get to an interior room. If you're downtown, if you're in the city, if you're in a building, get to the basement. If there's a basement, if there's something under the basement, get under that. Get to any shelter you can as quickly as you can, right? Fallout's coming in, so before the fallout, treat the wounded. Depends on where you're at, depends on your situation, depends on who you are, right? Do you want to treat the wounded? Do you have actually medical equipment with you? This is some basic stuff: trauma pack, gauze, wraps, Israeli bandages, tourniquets. People could be hurt, right? Could be hurt by the shock wave, could be hurt by falling debris. Say you're downtown, you're on the ground, people are hurt. You may want to take a few minutes at that point and try to treat the wounded, help the wounded. That's on you. You might be hurt yourself, and you might hope that someone's going to come over and help you out. And then do you have any protective equipment? So this is a basic Israeli gas mask, about $40 on Amazon. It's got the cartridge in here with it. Not bad to have, right? Fallouts are coming, and you don't want to breathe in fallout if you don't have a gas mask. Even a dust mask, right? Fallout is dust, radioactive dust. You don't want to breathe that in. So any kind of protective equipment, even just a poncho, right? If you have a poncho, this is a reusable poncho. You could have a disposable poncho. Dust is coming, right? Evil radioactive fallout dust is coming. You don't want that on you. You certainly don't want that in your lungs. So depending on where you're at, your situation, you might not carry a gas mask around with you. Maybe you just got a handkerchief you can put over your face, breathing in fallout, anything like that. Good deep cover, and you may have a few minutes to gather supplies. Do you keep a get home bag with you if you're away from home? Can you get to it in a few minutes, right? Things like food, and I'll just show this here. Food might be important. We're looking at, I'll skip ahead a little bit. 2 weeks, 48 hours, something like that. You're not going to starve to death in that time, so food may not be as big of a deal. Water is certainly good to have. So any kind of water, right? If you have that, you've got your bug out bag, you've got your get home bag. If you can get to it in a couple minutes and it has things like food, water, medical supplies, anything like that, maybe you go for it. Maybe you just go for shelter, right? We're saying 15 minutes, depending on where you're at. There could be another strike inbound. You don't know the situation, so you have to really feel that out. It might just make sense to go for cover. If there's is there any kind of a stocked fallout shelter? If you're at home, you're just running the house. If you're in a big city, you're trying to find a basement. If you're between that, right, it really depends. There's the book, Nuclear War Survival Skills, is a good book. It actually talks about how to build quick bunkers, and certainly a quick, dirty bunker is better than no bunker, and any kind of bunker is probably better than your house. So during the fallout, Large particles hit the ground first, close to the explosion. Smaller particles could be carried by the wind for thousands of miles and could stay up in the air for weeks. So the longer the particles are in the air, there's radioactive decay and it hits pretty quickly. So the longer they are traveling thousands of miles, weeks in the air, whatever it happens to be, those aren't as bad as the big particles. They're going to come down right away. So the nuclear weapon hits the ground, makes a huge crater, all that stuff that was in the crater becomes radioactively charged and is going to start falling back down. And that's the bad stuff, right? So don't want to inhale particles, wash them off quickly. So if you're in a situation where it takes you longer to get to some kind of shelter and you're out and the particles are on you, first thing you'll want to do is get those off, and hopefully you didn't inhale any. So stay in cover, right? At this point, we're 15 minutes in, we're 10 minutes in, maybe you're half an hour in, you're in your shelter. You want to stay in that shelter. Minimum's 48 hours. So the amount of radiation, radioactive decay, the fallout will be about 100 times less lethal after 48 hours because it divides quickly. There may be hot spots, right? You could be in an area with a hot spot. They say 2 weeks. 2 weeks is even better. You can even go without food for 2 weeks. You're going to need water for 2 weeks. So if you don't have water, at least do 48 hours before you start looking for water. But in general, if you're in an area with fallout, you want to avoid it for at least 2 weeks. And even then, right, minimize your exposure, food, water, medical supplies, radio. Do you have a flashlight? You're not going to have any time, right? You get hit by that bright flash of light, you get missiles down, missiles incoming on your phone, whatever the alert is. You're not going to have time to be like, hey, I'm going to go grab my supplies. I might go down to the pharmacy, pick up some meds. You're not going to have time for any of that. There's no time. You have to have it ready. You may only have minutes, right? Do you have a basement? Go for the basement. You need to do it quickly, whatever it's going to be. And you need to stay there as long as you can, even if you can longer than 2 weeks. But certainly at least 48 hours. You might not make 2 weeks without water, as I said. So there's kind of different situations out there. So time's passed, you have your supplies, you're in your bunker, you survived. What happens after that, right? You emerge from the bunker, and there could be two scenarios, right? Is it Mad Max Nuclear Wasteland, or is it a little house on the prairie, happy homestead? That might depend on where you're at. You can go to nuclearwarmaps.com, and I've talked about it before. You may already know. It's not bad to know are you in an area? So there aren't really enough nuclear weapons to hit everywhere. So if you're in a big city, that's near a military base, if you're near a military base or anything like that, you're likely in a target area. It just happens where I'm at is not in a target area, and we're actually not in a fallout area either. Good luck for that, but depending on where you're at. So we're going to do Happy Homestead, maybe we're going to keep doing Happy Homestead with a mix of Mad Max. We'll have to see, but let's talk about that. Food and water are going to be important for the rest of your life, however it happens to be after nuclear war. So food and water in dust-tight containers are not contaminated by fallout. So it's good to know, even if the fallout dust lands on the food, as long as the dust is not in the food, you're probably okay. So we showed the MRE, right? The MRE, you blow the dust off. Hopefully it doesn't have dust on it. As long as it's not mixed in with the food, we're in that 2 week after range, probably okay. You don't want to inhale the dust. Same thing with water. If your water's sealed in a bag, it's not a bag, it's clearly a plastic bottle, probably okay. Now, if you have water from sources, you probably see in the background, I got about 30,000 gallons in a pool, more or less. Particles are probably going to land in that. Now, the particles don't spread the radiation to the water, so the water itself doesn't become radioactive. The particles will still be radioactive for a long time. You wouldn't want to ingest those, so you're going to want to have some way to filter, right? Some way to filter the water. Recommend a earth filter to start with. So we wouldn't want to jump into, say, our Sawyer and use this to filter the radioactive water, because those radioactive particles are going to build up in the filter. You're really going to want to get those out before you use something like your Sawyer to filter out the water. And I almost forgot these. Of course, you got your ThyroSafe iodine tablets. Not bad to use, right? You'd want to use these right away. Follow the instructions, do your own research. I'm not giving free medical advice here. They're not appropriate for everyone all the time in every situation. It certainly could save your life. So I want to throw that out there. Certainly you got your potassium iodine tablets, could save your life, may not be appropriate. Do your own research. You're going to want to use it right away. Within an hour of being exposed to radiation. You may not have an hour, but something like that's certainly good. I should have shown that at the beginning. I got my pile of stuff here. So water, use some kind of a ground filter, right? You're going to want to filter it, rocks, clay, filter it first, whether you do a gypsy well or something else, some kind of a pre-filter to get the dust out before you put it in something like your soil. Once again, food that's sealed is okay. Food with particles mixed in is not okay. In terms of hunting, we're talking now long-term self-sufficiency. Hunting, you got maybe some pigs in the background. I'm not going to hunt those. Those are good pigs. Animals that have been consuming, say, radioactive particles, radioactive water, may not be safe to eat, and they probably wouldn't look very good, right? Probably avoid the organs, right? It's a lot of little subtle detail I'm not trying to get too much into. But water, food, long-term medical supplies, growing food. So, I'm seeing stuff where they're saying, like, you got to scrape the top 5 inches of topsoil off. Certainly you don't want a ton of radioactive dust in your garden, in your food, depending on where you're at. It may be unavoidable. This certain reality, right, is after nuclear attack. Even if you survive the blast, even if you're not hit by the fallout, cancer is going to be a problem for a lot of people for a long time. You're still going to have to eat. So you grow the food, maybe you scrape some dust off, maybe you don't get hit by dust. You're still going to have to eat. You're still going to have to grow food. You might have to take care of animals and whatnot. It's just going to be a fact of life. But yeah, you can still farm. Just understanding there's going to be that constant, right? We're all going to have that constant dose of radiation, because even if you're in a safer area, there's still fallout, and it's still going to be blowing around. So what's the most survivable option, right? Would be a bunker, right? That's the bottom line. That's the gold standard of surviving a nuclear explosion, is a bunker. Nuclear War Survival's book actually has a lot of great diagrams, stories, how to build a bunker. So if that's something you're at all interested in, building a bunker is possible. It talks about tools, designs, and it even goes into the idea, if you're in a city and you get some warning, you get that alert on your phone, maybe you can evacuate to an area and then build a bunker. And I'm not going to get into that because there's a lot of what ifs in that situation. Is it better to just find shelter, or is it better to try to get out of town before the nukes hits, knowing there could be an EMP effect that could disable your car, leaving you stranded and then away from shelter, right? I'm not going to get into that too much. If you're interested in the idea, maybe we would build a bunker. That's certainly a good book to start with. And then there's what they're now calling strategic relocation. Use a resource like Nuclear War Survival Maps or something like that. If you're concerned, you can move places, right? There are places that probably wouldn't be as impacted by nuclear explosions as others. There's certainly no guarantees in that kind of a situation, but strategic relocation beforehand is an option. Not so much once that bright flash of light hits you. So there's going to be people inevitably, and people I know, anytime I have this conversation, is I wouldn't want to survive. I don't care. Why am I watching this video? You're crazy. Why would you want to survive? I would not want to survive. I don't have to worry about it. Well, so there were these rugby players that crashed in the Andes in 1973. I suspect if you ask those rugby players before they got on the plane, how do you feel about the idea of cannibalism to survive? I suspect all of them, I'm not saying most of them, all of them would say no. I would never do that, right? Because you ask me, I'm going in with nope. That's the line, right? And we're drawing that line of cannibalism. Sorry, you're crazy. Why are we having this conversation? But they did crash, right? Their plane crashed in the Andes. It was horrible, and many did survive, and they made sacrifices, and it was not easy. But if you ask them ahead of time, guarantee, probably to the man, they're going to say, you're crazy. Why are you asking me this? So you may think you wouldn't want to survive now, and I totally understand it. After it happens, right, it's a different game. It's a different situation. You don't know who you're going to be, what you're going to do after that. So think about it now. I'm not saying you have to dig a nuclear bunker. I'm not saying you have to strategically relocate, but even some little things. There's little things you could do now that might make a difference. So, as always, I hope that helps out. Thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.